Good afternoon. It's Monday the 10th of March 2014, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host this afternoon, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson. We're also going to be joined in a few moments by Guy Taylor. Guy is somebody we've had on the programme before and I know produced quite a response from our audience. And Guy's going to be talking about his work fighting corruption in the court, and also criminal activity by some of Britain's bailiffs firms. But we'll start off with serious events in Europe, and of course that focuses us immediately on the Ukraine.
Yes, indeed. Right, a few technical problems, I'm afraid, so we're doing this manually today. Yesterday, David Cameron, Merkel and Putin were on the phone together to discuss the Ukraine, particularly the situation in the Crimea, which, if you remember, is being branded as some massive aggression by Russia. What isn't being discussed by the BBC is that Russia and the Ukraine have a treaty in place, we mentioned this last week, regarding Crimea, which not only covers the port of Sevastopol, which plays host, of course, to the Black Sea Fleet, but also covers the basing of 25,000 Russian troops in Crimea. And Putin pointed out that Ukrainian authorities were, quotes, doing nothing to curb the ultra-nationalist and radical forces outrages committed in Kiev and many other regions. And he also again reiterated that the steps taken by the legitimate government in Crimea are based on international law. Now, I've been speaking to some friends in Poland and Latvia over the weekend, and the reports I'm receiving indicate that in fact, Ukraine is now split in three, not in two. People in the western part of Ukraine wish to join the EU. Of course, we've mentioned that before. In the east and in the Crimea, they wish to join Russia. But in Kiev now, they want full independence. And I'm also told that the majority of people who've come out in protest now regret doing so because they recognise what was the operation that was actually played on them. To some degree at least, and they don't like the fact that Yanukovych's government has been replaced by a bunch of oligarchs. So anyway, telephone call between these three. I can't decide who it is that Merkel is most hating there, whether it's Putin or Cameron.
Something's left a bad taste in the mouth.
Certainly has, yes. But in the meantime, today, William Hague is hosting none other than Radek Sikorski, the Polish foreign minister. And he, like many in the Polish government, seems to be a bit of a nutcase, perhaps, only saying things that he is hoping that his Western bosses wish him to say. We cannot let Putin get away with this, he's saying. By annexing Crimea, Russia is forcing a major change of boundaries in Europe. It means the breaking of post-Cold War consensus. That is verboten. And of course, he's Oxford educated. So possibly no surprises that he's using this kind of rhetoric. I'm saying William Hague on Monday, he said, according to the Telegraph here, we are as one on Ukraine. We cannot allow Putin to redraw the map of Europe along ethnic lines. Europe is based on the principle of overcoming borders rather than redrawing them, and so on. So the usual type of rhetoric. And in the meantime, we mentioned also last week that Zbigniew Brzezinski had been out of the woodwork to comment on the Ukraine on CNN. I think that was Sunday week ago. Well, I wanted to highlight this little article, which is really quite good, by freelance journalist Mike Whitney, published on a number of different websites. You should have no problem finding it if you just search for Grand Puppet Master Brzezinski. And he begins by quoting the veteran New York Times reporter Stephen Kinzer from the Boston Globe, saying, from the moment that the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, the United States has relentlessly pursued a strategy of encircling Russia, just as it has with other perceived enemies like China and Iran. It has brought 12 countries in Central Europe, all of them formerly allied with Moscow, into the NATO alliance. US military power is now directly on Russia's borders. This crisis is in part the result of a zero-sum calculation that has shaped US policy towards Moscow since the Cold War. Any loss for Russia is an American victory, and anything positive that happens to, for, or in Russia is bad for the United States. This is an approach that intensifies confrontation rather than soothing it, so I couldn't agree more with that. And then Mike Whitney, whose article this is, quotes Brzezinski as having written in the Washington Post, if the West wants to avoid a conflict, there should be no ambiguity in the Kremlin as to what might be precipitated by further adventurous use of force in the middle of Europe. And Whitney goes on to say of Brzezinski, he calls him Dr. Strangelove, is calling the Kremlin adventurous when his recommendations would put NATO, the US and Moscow on hair-trigger alert, increasing the chances of an error in judgment that could lead to thermonuclear war. Isn't that the pot calling the kettle black? And, well, indeed. So I recommend this article. Everybody should have a read at it. And in the meantime, of course, we're seeing more evidence of external influence within the Ukraine. Videos posted on YouTube which allege that the US private security firm, it was known as Blackwater, is operating in Donetsk. Western press, according to RT, they say they're hitting back. They're accusing Russia of fabricating reports to justify aggression. Of course, we know that Blackwater has changed its name a couple of times in the last couple of years. I believe it's called, what's it called now? No, I think it's changed again. I think it's called Academy now. Academy.
Okay.
Yeah, but still, it's most widely recognised as Blackwater. So obviously people are going to use that phrase when they see it. But this, I believe, is very similar to what happened in the early days of the Syrian conflict. And again, we've talked about small arms being stolen from Ukrainian weapons dumps. This is now a report, again, originally from RT, I believe, suggesting that quite a lot of surface-to-air missiles have actually been stolen from the Ukrainian military. So again, quite a dangerous situation continuing to build in that country, despite the fact that the real hot activity that was happening over the last couple of weeks has cooled off a little. There's still a lot of dirty stuff going on in the background.
And it was Brzezinski who was on YouTube film footage talking about Afghanistan and saying how how Russian munitions were being bought up so that effectively Russian weapons could be unleashed on Russian forces in Afghanistan. So very dirty dealings. Brzezinski, of course, still in the melting pot.
Absolutely, yes. Yes, and again, also from last week, we mentioned that the US was withdrawing cooperation with Russia with regard to military exercises and so on. The Russians now have followed suit, and they've said that they will now stop receiving any US inspectors under which they were going to Russia under the New START treaty. And I believe this was nuclear non-proliferation. So Russians now no longer accepting any foreign inspectors under the New START Treaty and the Vienna document of 2011, according to ITAR TASS. And the Russian Defense Ministry spokesman said, we are ready to take this step in reply to the Pentagon statement on the suspension of cooperation between the Defense Ministry of Russia and the United States. And we've just got to keep in mind that it was the United States that started this. As they've started this from the beginning, really. So Russia is reacting to what's going on in the US, but Western media would have us believe that it's the other way around.
Well, that's absolutely the case, and we've been doing some research over the last few days into the organisation Chatham House. Now, Chatham House became of interest to me in quite a big way when we started to have a look at political charity Common Purpose. And it was Common Purpose that was using the basic Chatham House rule. I'll just read you that, which is when a meeting or part thereof is held under the Chatham House rule, participants are free to use the information received, but neither the identity nor the affiliation of the speaker or speakers nor that of any other participant may be revealed. So this is a secretive system of running meetings, and we were particularly interested in what Chatham House was starting to say about the conflict in the Ukraine. So this is their website. Encourage people to really go and have a very good look around this organisation to see what it's about. But what attracted my interest was that Chatham House on the 6th of March pushed out a report on Ukraine. Chatham House Expert Group Summary, Western Responses to the Ukraine Crisis, Policy Options. So here's an organisation actually putting out political options as if it was a legitimate form of government, but in fact something rather different. So if we look behind the scenes, these are some of the key people that were involved in the meeting which generated this report. We've got Mr. Keir Giles, Associate Fellow, the Russia and Eurasia Programme. And the big boss here is the Right Honourable Sir Roderick Lyne, Deputy Chairman, Chatham House. And also, of course, we see British Ambassador to Russia 2000 to 2004. So why should we be interested in this organisation? Well, here's the document, pretty clear what they're talking about. And just so that there's no misunderstanding, here's the Chatham House rule. But let's look at what they say. On the 5th of March 2014, Chatham House convened a special roundtable with a group of leading experts on Russia and Ukraine and on the West's relations with those countries in order to consider options that are now available to the West in response to Russia's actions in Crimea and other parts of the Ukraine. The meeting included former ambassadors, business leaders, experts on various aspects of Russia, such as its economy, military and foreign policy. There was a wide range of views and options on the best way of handling the situation. And then it goes on to say, of course, that this was held under Chatham House rules. Now, we contacted Chatham House to say it's one thing that comments by people are not attributable, but we thought that it was only reasonable the public, the British public, should be told who was in the meeting. And we were told that that information was absolutely secret, and that was part of Chatham House's basic rules. So we said, well, in that case, what confidence have we got that the report that Chatham House has made should be taken seriously by the British public? And I have to say to you that a young lady, very polite young lady, said that we should believe the report simply because it was issued by Chatham House. Well, we'll leave you to consider what that really means and where that puts democracy, but I'll just list some of the lead titles for the responses in this Chatham House document. It says that EU members and the United States need to communicate a unified, tough and explicit commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty, independence, self-determination. It's vital for them to emphasise that Ukraine's future must be decided by Ukrainians. The West demand must be a return of Russian forces to their bases. Should the Russian government not de-escalate its military presence in Crimea, I'll start again. Should the Russian government not de-escalate its military presence in Crimea, cancelling participation in the G8 summit, halting Russia's OECD membership application and suspending trade negotiations, as the United States has done, are all appropriate near-term steps. The most effective near-term pressure that can be exerted on Russia will be financial and economic. It then talks about freezing assets. It also says that the West should ramp up immediately its counter-narrative to the Russian propaganda operation. And then it goes on to say that the EU should really take a lead for what's actually going to happen. So a lot of opinion by anonymous people, but this is the main gentleman who was speaking out about the meeting. And sorry, the text's a little bit small there. But essentially, this gentleman's an expert on the former USSR. He's also an expert, it would appear, on military aircraft, but interesting, he's been working with the BBC's monitoring service. He's been looking at economic matters, and as well as his BBC broadcast experience, Keir has been writing for several years as Russia correspondent for air journalism matters, and then he's commenting on NATO. So it appears that this man is an absolute expert in the region, but we're not too sure as to why his opinion is put forward as now almost being government policy. And this is the other gentleman we showed, and it gets extremely interesting here because Here we have Saline, and basically he's, of course, a government man, third secretary to Moscow, assistant private secretary, the Foreign Secretary, Lord Carrington, head of Chancery. He's been working with John Major, etc., etc. And if we follow through the last bit, we see Chatham House. He's also an advisor to JP Morgan Chase. He's got interests with Peter Hambro Mining, as was. He's been involved with the Russian-British Chamber of Commerce and, of course, Ditchley Foundation and the Privy Council. So who is actually speaking behind closed doors at Chatham House? We're not too sure. Let's just have a look at the department that's been pontificating on Ukraine, is this one here, Russia and Eurasia. And if we get into the meat of it, they are talking here about people involved who are deeply connected with the BBC. So here we've got a particular person, Alexei Solohobenko, formerly head of the Eurasia service at the BBC, and is now news and deployments editor of BBC Global News. So my question is the BBC reporting the news in Ukraine or creating it? And this is text from a speech which Alexei gave. And here it says, one other thing that I wanted to discuss is something we're certainly getting as the BBC. We've a very large deployment now on the ground. We have people in Lviv, we have people in Kharkiv, we have people in Simferopol, thank you, Sevastopol and other places. We've sent teams basically across Ukraine to villages, to towns. And this leads us in very nicely to the fact that UK Column TV has been warning about BBC's action in many vulnerable countries, principally through BBC Charity Media Action. And this is, of course, the sort of reporting that the BBC comes up with. And although this was back on the 25th of February, here we see top left, British forensic experts are in Kiev to help establish responsibility for the deaths of protesters, mostly killed by Ukrainian government snipers. And we're going to say, interesting to see lies and propaganda dripping from the pens of the BBC, as we now get information that the snipers came from a rather different background. So make up your own mind, but if you're not aware of Chatham House and Chatham House's power to influence and direct British government policy, please visit their website and have a look at some of their documents for yourself. Well, we now switch back to UK, and hopefully Guy Taylor should be on the line. Are you there, Guy?
Yes, I am, Brian. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you very much for joining us. And really, the floor's yours, Guy, but you're going to tell us something about this criminality and corruption going on in the British courts, and indeed with many of the increasingly vicious bailiffs companies.
Well, what's happened now, Brian, is the culture of bailiffs' conduct has been exposed and blown up. They're manufacturing our consent to get us out of our properties. And that's exactly what's been happening, and it's now been exposed. So that's what I'm here to talk to you about today.
Right, okay. Well, tell us what you've been up to and what you think are the key events. I know that you've had some very, very interesting information about a lady up in London who was evicted from her home, but you've also been fighting in the courts yourself. So start where you think you want to. Right,
okay. Well, what the situation is last year, at the end of last year, when I was on your show last time, I explained that I'd been taken to court by British Gas for obstructing electricity. Even though British Gas weren't the suppliers of the electricity, they'd made a fraudulent warrant, broken into my property and switched it off. This went on for 2 years. I was on bail for 2 years and told that I would be I was taken to Crown Court, and I was told that if I was found guilty, I would get a 2-year sentence. I represent myself as a self-litigant. Obviously, I've got people who help me on everything. But when we went to court, the Crown prosecution, I've been saying all along there was no evidence because they weren't supplying the properties. And when we got to the Crown Court and the jury was due to be sworn out, the Crown Prosecution Service folded. The judge was very good and said that, you realise that this is going to have serious repercussions. The Crown Prosecution agreed, and I was awarded costs against the Crown Prosecution Service, the biggest bunch of lawyers in the country, as a self-litigant. Move on slightly from there now. What I then done was got the documents that they were using against me in court, took out the statements that the bailiffs had used, and that they broke into the property, or that they entered the property with a warrant and blah-de-blah-de-blah. And I took those documents out and the photographs of my meter, because it wasn't British Gas meter, and I then applied it to them, and I issued a private criminal prosecution against the two British Gas bailiffs on February the 28th in Worcester Magistrates Court. The judge, who I know well from previous experiences, and I haven't always got the right result, he agreed with me, and he then therefore issued on the 28th of February in Worcester a burglary charge against both of the bailiffs. So that was what happened. The Gas bailiffs charged with burglary. I'm the prosecutor in the matter at the end of this month. So we now move on, because these things are going on everywhere, and we now move on, and there's a lady in Pinner in London called Grace, and she had a family home with her husband and their son, and we've been trying to help her for the last few months because her and her husband split up and got divorced, and he then became bankrupt. What happened then was that obviously they were trying to seize his assets, but she got a court order stating that the family home couldn't be involved, and it was her and the kid, and to be left alone. And this court order was made. What's happened now? You see, the trustees and the receivers, etc., have decided that they're going to take her family home, and so a couple of months ago, about 2 or 3 months ago, they went there, and with the police believing that the documents that they had in their hands were legitimate documents, the police stand there to make sure there's no common law offence of breach of the peace broken, but allowed this group of men to enter her premises and throw her out. We're doing stuff called legal forensics, so we're forensically examining the documentation, other than not just the story attached to the documentation, the actual process and procedure that allows the prescribed form that allows these people to do this to us. So Grace was out on the streets, and even though she had the documents to prove that she was, she should never, they had no valid cause to go in there. She then, after the bailiffs have executed the warrant and left the premises, that's the end of their business. She then went back in to the premises, which are her family home, paid for, there was no mortgage on it or anything, and started living there again. And of course, we were expecting the bailiffs to go away and then go and get another sort of court order, if you want to call them, and come back. This has happened in the last few days, and the bailiffs came back, gave her a court order, I say that in brackets, and they've physically removed her from the premises, whereby she even was arrested because the police were supporting the bailiff action, and said that if she refused to go, that she'd be guilty of breach of the peace or whatever, or assaulting the bailiff. She was then in police custody. Well, while in police custody, obviously Grace has got conversant with the process and procedure concerning the prescribed form of the documents, and she asked for a duty solicitor. And a duty solicitor, I haven't got much faith in duty solicitors, but the duty solicitor came down and he saw the documentation and he actually laughed. Because he could see that it was clearly a nonsense. The police then let her go. They didn't charge her with anything. So what she's then done is gone and seen a forensic legal expert, who a lovely man who we deal with, Mr. Ebert, and shown him the documentation, etc. So he suggested she go back down to the police station, take this documentation, and present it to the police because it is false. It's clearly false. Now, the bailiff company had got 2 guys staying in the property to secure it for them. So when she's gone down the police station, and we have all the audio records of this, a very good Hillingdon, I believe, a very good police officer, a sergeant, on looking at the documents, could clearly see that they were false. The document itself is a badly printed document. It's got spelling mistakes on it. And he then said that it says Elizabeth II versus her, which we know wouldn't say that. It would say Regina. And it says Elizabeth II in writing, as in THESE. You know, it's actually a fraudulent document. And it's got the royal seal on it. And it's fraudulent. This is very much in line with what happened with me, because the bank to my premises. And that's why... partly why I've got charged with burglary, and that instance, I mean, contempt of court and perverting the course of justice are further issues. So the police have agreed, and we've got this on audio, the police have agreed to go to the premises and arrest these guys because they've been partying all weekend in her family home, eating her food and drinking her drink. They've agreed. Anyway, Grace has been assisted by some very competent people who are engaged, who know the law, not just lay advocates, but people in a professional capacity who may have been solicitors before and moved on. So she's gone back up there today to try and get back in the property. The police had promised her, and again, the sergeant who was dealing with it was a very, very nice man and looking at it from a completely common law perspective. These documents are not correct. And they do need examination. What's happened now is they were supposed to be going up to arrest the bailiffs. But of course, there's been a shift change. And I say that in 2 ways, because there's also been a shift change. And the mentality now is starting to apparently change. She's out on the street with her child, with her son, and 2 chaps who've got no legitimate, and I will say that, and if anyone wants to sue me, because these are fraudulent pieces of paper. They've got no court seals on. They're in breach of absolutely everything that they possibly could be. And what you start realizing is, when you engage in things, you start realizing that they're manufacturing our consent to get us out of our properties. Now, that manufactured consent is all these people have. And it's got to the point where the culture has got so bad inside the court system that they're allowing bailiffs and corporations to write out their own court documents. Now, that's in complete breach of their own civil procedure rules, 2.6 and 2.6.3, I believe. The court must seal documents, and they shall not seal without evidence. Now, when we go further into this, Brian, it becomes a massive black hole, because when you contact the land registry, not only will they not stand under any documents they've got, in that particular case, they're stating that, and this is straight from the court file, because we've asked the court whether they will stand under the writ of possession, and the court have said, the court manager has said there is no writ of possession on the court file. So we move on and we go to the land registry. And the land registry state that the proprietor is the lady herself. And it also states that there was a court order on the file that the notice of matrimonial home rights under the Family Law Act in favour of her are standing. But yet, what's happened is these chaps have gone round, manufactured their own orders based on whatever this trustee for her husband or whatever the receivers are claiming. And of course, because the demons are running amok. They're writing out their own documents. They're obviously greedy individuals, and they're trying to obtain property by manufacturing the consent. And this is happening with people all over this country. If you actually take the two issues, you have your story of why you're in your particular position, but you also have the process and procedure which the courts have been operating under. So your story might be a huge document, and you go to a solicitor with it, and he makes lots of money, and in fact he probably retires based upon your story, which you'll probably get found to be failing in when it goes to the court. But on the other hand is the court process and procedure, which must operate to a prescribed form. And that's what it's all about. Now, if you went to your solicitor and showed him the court documents and said this and that is wrong, he wouldn't support you in it. And the reason he wouldn't support you in it, and I advise everybody to do this, when next speak to a solicitor, say, are you representing me? And the solicitor will say yes. And say, am I your first interest? And they'll say yes. And say, but I also understand you're an officer of the court. And he'll say yes. And say, what are you first and foremost? And they will say an officer of the court. So if you offer the officer of the court without knowing what you're doing, documentation that you say isn't correct, he won't have the bottle, and that's the trouble with this, he won't have the bottle to question it, because otherwise they will say that as an officer of the court, he is undermining the court itself. And this is what's going on. It's the culture that's operating inside these systems that's allowing them to rob people on false consent. It's deception in itself, but they're manufacturing people's consent. And when you actually examine and you legally, forensically examine the documentation and apply it to their own civil procedure rules, you will find that these people, these trustees, these receivers, these accountants that work with the courts, who are operating for the banks, you discover that the whole process falls apart. And so now, hopefully, we're in a position where I personally, with the help of others, great help of others, have managed to get bailiffs charged with burglary. Well, what does that mean? Well, if they think at the end of the day there's a criminal charge coming their way, they may not be so keen, or they might be more keen to get the paperwork correct and make sure everything they're doing is legitimate.
Guy?
Yeah.
Sorry to just interject there. Unusually, we are running very tightly to time today for a number of reasons.
Sorry,
you've given us a brilliant overview of what you've come up against. You're talking about very, very serious matters of obviously fraudery, criminal activity in relation to the courts. Could we give you an invite to come back on, say, Thursday or Friday? Could you manage that?
Of course, not a problem, Brian.
Okay, we'll give you a longer slot to follow on through that, and hopefully we can start to tell people some of the solutions as well.
Fantastic.
Okay, I'm sorry to cut you a little bit short.
That's okay, that's not a problem, Brian. Okay. I know I ran, don't worry, okay?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for joining us. Right, one of the reasons we wanted to move on a little bit, and as you've just heard, we will get Guy back again to cover some of his material, but we wanted to give you an update on the Cornish mother that was sectioned just over a week ago as a result of reporting paedophile images that were circulating at her child's school. So Emma, the young mother, is sent a picture with her back to you with a green striped bag. But this is what's been going on over the last few days, really horrific things. Last week, we played a voice recording of Emma pleading for help from Bodmin Community Hospital, where she said she was to be medicated. Well, unfortunately, that has actually happened. A few days later, she was forcibly medicated, whilst being told if she did not take the drugs, she would never see her children again. We can also tell you that in the last 24 hours, her dose of drugs was doubled, and that decision was made even though she was telling the psychiatrist that the drugs were already affecting her memory. Now, let us have a look at some of the facts around this. I'm just going to bring up on screen from drugs.com. These are the side effects of the first drug that was given to Emma. And we should be able to show you some of the very long list of side effects. Let's see what comes up here. Well, on screen at the moment, we've got bloating, blurred vision, change in vision, drooling, and on it goes. So I recommend that you go to this website and have a look. These are some of the side effects. It would seem to us that anybody that's taking any of these so-called psychotropic drugs is actually being poisoned. In some cases, obviously with very large doses, they're going to suffer severe side effects. So that was just the list of adverse side effects for the first drug. And she's now been put onto this drug. Let's have a look at this one. Nervousness. We've got a whole range of things: restlessness, shuffling walk, stiffness of the limbs, pale skin, redness of the skin. It goes on and on and on. So I'm going to encourage people to actually go here to have a look. So Emma is a young lady who discovered paedophile photographic material circulating at a school. She reported it, and within a very short space of time, she's victimised and bullied by the local authority, and then she's sectioned, and now she's being forcibly medicated. And in her opinion, this has come from Emma through people she is in contact with at the moment. They're saying that in Emma's opinion, they are drugging her to the extent that she cannot actually remember what took place at the school. And it was only last week that UK Column News did a number of cases around the country where particularly mothers had reported paedophile activity, and the net result was the same. They'd been sectioned. Well, if you want to know who is ultimately responsible for Emma's so-called care, it's Peninsula Community Health, healthcare in your community. And we were intrigued that once we get into this, we find it is actually a company. You're not simply dealing with the NHS. And here is a list of the directors as per the last financial accounts. And this is also from the accounts, and you can read here. We'll just highlight it. So it says that PCH was incorporated on the 5th of March 2011 and commenced trading on the 1st of October 2011 when the Community Healthcare Services contract was transferred from Cornwall and Isles of Scilly Primary Care Trust. It has completed its first 18 months of trading on the 31st of March 2013, achieving a profit before taxation of £317,000. So if anybody believes that if you go into Bodmin Community Hospital, and I believe 14 or 13 other hospitals in Cornwall, that you are being cared for by the NHS, I'm sorry to say that you are within an organisation not for profit but making profit. Bit of an oxymoron there, but are we confident in Emma's care?
So just to understand this now, you are considered mentally ill. You go into a place like this where they have no incentive whatsoever to cure you of anything.
Well, I think it's worse than that, Mike, actually, because a little bit of research we did at the end of last week shows that key psychiatrists associated with this hospital and other hospitals in this particular community care area are also tied in with drugs trials. So one could ask the question, is Emma or any of the other present inmates of the psychiatric ward at Bodmin Community Hospital
guinea pigs?
Are they being used as guinea pigs? So don't take our word on it. Do your research. But we will continue to post updates on Emma. We are very, very concerned at her safety because the facts of the case, as we have seen them, are that a mother who has attempted to expose paedophilic material circulating around a school has now been incarcerated in a psychiatric unit. This is not Putin's Russia. This is not Stalinist Russia. This is David Cameron's Britain in 2014. And it will get worse unless we, the public, withdraw our consent and start to take action. And of course, Guy Taylor is one of the many people showing us exactly how to do that. So we'll just jump through to this report, which of course came up last week, but the Mirror in particular asking why the Patrick Rock child porn inquiry went to with that the name goes out to the Serious Crime Agency instead of the Met Police. This was the man at the back of it. So the secretive National Crime Agency took on the case instead of the Met. And although we're not showing the slide, I believe you found some information that people are now saying, well, do we really need the Met?
Yeah, people are beginning to call for the Met to be scrapped and replaced. But perhaps it's already in process.
Maybe the Met, with all its problems and a little bit of corruption, is still too effective and so is dangerous to the government. Well, of course, this was the other story over the weekend. Lord Justice Fulford has been connected, would appear very closely to the National Council for Civil Liberties, and that brings him into the firing line over the paedophile group Pi. But according to the Daily Mail and other national newspapers, he was doing some work in the background which appears to have been defending the activities of Pi. And is it significant that this man is also been acting as an advisor to the Queen?
Good question.
It is a good question, isn't it? Of course, behind him, all those learned books, but he still can't work out that Pi was a pretty unpleasant and devious organisation.
Right, jobs, because obviously the Conservatives have been crowing for a long time now, and every once in a while there's an infographic comes out of Conservative Central Office regarding new private sector jobs. And this is typical of them. I just picked one at random. 1.4 million private sector jobs. Recovery for hard-working people. What a great job the Conservatives are doing. But of course, zero-hour contracts has been a controversial issue with them. And this is from 2013. I believe Ian Duncan Smith defending zero-hour contracts. And why are we talking about this? Well, the news came out in the last day or two that there's been a massive rise in employees on zero-hour contracts. Now, what are zero-hour contracts? These are contracts of employment where, in fact, you're not guaranteed any kind of number of hours work per week. So you might only be on £8 an hour, which is, I believe, is something like 85% of these jobs that the Conservatives are so excited about having created in the last few years are on £8 an hour or less. And now we're finding out that 500 and something thousand jobs in the last 12 months have been created on zero-hour contracts. So this is just an indication of how the government is fiddling the figures with regard to employment. That basically everything they say about how great the employment situation is in Britain is a lie. And in fact, other things that they're doing with regard to the employment figures, for example, and for unemployment figures actually, is they are not counting anybody as unemployed if they're on sanctions from the job centre. So if you're late for a meeting with the job centre and you end up on a sanction, then you drop off the unemployment statistics for that month. So all kinds of manipulation going on around the job market. But I just think that the zero-hour contract business really horrible for people.
Lies, propaganda, corruption in the courts, criminal bailiffs, slave labour, it's pretty obvious. Quick update on Robert Greene. We can tell you the charge against Robert Greene is that you, Robert Greene, faced a petition alleging you had contravened Section 234A of the Criminal Procedure Act 1995. The matter is a solemn proceeding where ultimately you will face trial by sheriff and jury. And remember that reference relates to Scottish law. So remember that Robert has now been incarcerated since the 13th of February and his crime simply to try and protect children from abuse.
Right,
Yeah.
okay, we're just going
Stunning.
to, yes indeed, we're going to finish off then just to remind everybody about the Crane Report, episode 6 tonight, and most importantly, Fracking Nightmare, where Ian Crane will have news of the judgment in the court case with regard to the eviction at Barton Moss, a potential eviction at Barton Moss. Important that you watch that programme. He has some pretty stunning news to tell you all about.
Okay, well, there you have it. Sorry if we were a little bit broken today. A few things going on in the studio, which Mike's been running around trying to fix, but we've gone out live, so that's all that matters. If you like what we're doing, please tell your friends and family and push us around the internet. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back same time tomorrow.
See you then.
Goodbye.